Hello and welcome to my latest video on FontStack. Now in this video I'm going to break with tradition and not do my usual masterclass videos. There's been quite a lot of additions gone into FontStack 1.01, so I want to go over them with you today. So let's kick off this video by looking at one of the first new features, which is multi-outs, a very popular and requested feature. Now to demonstrate the use of multiple audio outputs, I'm going to be loading FontStack inside of AUM, and I'm going to be driving it with 4 copies of MIDI step that you can see here. I have 4 instances of MIDI step, each playing a separate sequence, but all being fed directly into FontStack and controlling a different layer of FontStack. So here is the single copy of FontStack I've got here, and all the layers have been summed together and passed directly through to the single output. Let's take a listen to that before I do anything else. Awesome. So let's now take a look at how to get the individual dry layers out of here. When I say dry, I mean no effects. Now I'm going to start by reducing the main fader level, because this is where all the FontStack's layers are combined and output along with the effects. But we want to retrieve the individual layer outputs without effects, and then we can optionally add effects to them later on. So I'm going to start by adding a couple of audio channels, but instead of adding an audio unit as you usually would, I'm going to tap here and then click Multibus Audio Unit Instances and pick FontStack from the list. Now the number 2 that appears next to the FontStack icon indicates that we're taking output 2, which corresponds to layer A. Now if we enable the transport, you'll see now that there's actually audio passing through this channel. So let's go ahead and do the same for layer B. We just simply add another instance, a multibus instance, and you'll see it automatically takes it from layer B. So you can see that audio is passing through, so let's go ahead and add 2 more additional channels. One for layer C and one for layer D. Now it's important to stress that the send effects such as delay, chorus and reverb are not passed through to these individual outputs, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So we're now free to mix these layers within AUM. Now because we've sent a dry audio signal for each of the 4 layers to AUM, we can add our own effects on each of the layers, and they're not influenced by the send effects from within FontStack. Now FontStack does export an additional audio output which contains all the send effect returns. So if we add another channel here and add another multibus instance of FontStack, click on it, you'll see these are essentially the effect returns. So by mixing in these sound effect returns, we've got everything that was generated from the original combine output. This is fantastic, and we can hear this if we reduce the sliders of the 4 layers. You can see the only thing left is the ambience or the return effects coming through on that last channel. So there we have it. The first new feature, multiple outputs. Now another very useful function is the ability to copy or move or duplicate layers. Quite often you'll find yourself in a situation where you've configured a layer and want to move it with all its settings and scenes. Now as you can see here, layer 2 has an instrument assigned to each scene, so moving it manually is quite difficult. Plus, I'll just show you this. If you go into settings, we can turn on allow full screen mode and we get to see more of the interface. We don't have to scroll down to see the keyboard mapping, which is configured on a scene by scene basis. Now currently layers 3 and 4 haven't got a sound font assigned, and you can always tell by looking at the little dot in the top left corner of the layer button. That indicates that there is a sound font assigned to that layer. Now if I want to copy layer 2 to layer 4, I simply select layer 2 and then press and hold on that button, and a pop-up menu appears and I can pick layer 4 from this. You see immediately the little dot appear on the top of or top left of the layer 4 button, and if we look, it's now copied all the contents across to layer 4. It also pushes a copy of the current state to the undo buffer, so if at any time we want to undo that, we can just hit the undo button and everything reverts back to how it was. Now before I dig deep into some of the more exciting new features, I want to draw your attention to a few interface enhancements. Now I'm pointing these out because they become useful later in the video. The first one I want to look at is in the Manage Sound Fonts dialog. So if we bring up the Sound Font Manager, you'll see now that there's actually a path displayed below the main toolbar. This gives you a guide as to which folder you're in. And this becomes increasingly important if you have a single point of reference for all your sound fonts, and when you start creating separate folders for putting in different categories of sound font. Also notice that now there's a load sound font button on the toolbar in here, so we can actually select sound fonts and directly load them in by using the load button at the top of the screen. Also notice we try and work out which sound fonts are GM compatible and add this little GM tag to the end of the sound font name. Now also notice that when we browse for a sound font and we enter a specific folder, the actual folder name appears now inside this window as a subtitle. So this is again very useful for when you start accessing subfolders. So these are just quality of life additions to the UI, which certainly help maintaining and browsing your folders of sound fonts. Now you might have noticed some colour scheme changes that have gone on as I've been wandering around. You can now long press on the menu button and then select alternate colour schemes, or even change the knob style if you wish. Now another addition that I forgot to mention is the fact that we can, when we do a search and we press the search button and type in something like GM, it's going to return all the instrument names with the word GM in there, but most of us know GM is quite often specified in the sound font name. Now if we take a look in settings, there's an additional option in here. Search includes sound fonts. And when this is enabled, the search actually includes sound fonts that contain GM in the name as well as the instrument name. So now let's turn our attention to a really good new feature. I really like this one. It's called control keys. The idea behind it is that we can assign or we can execute certain operations, program operations from your master keyboard by just pressing notes. Now some of you may have noticed the additional layer in the key mapping section of the app, and this is the control keys layer, and we can pick this up and move it around and resize it to suit. But what it does is allow us to specify a range of keys on the master keyboard, and then we can assign functions to those keys. So if I double tap on this layer, you'll see a control keys window open. And if I turn on the little power button in the top right corner, you'll see that the control keys layer lights up, telling us it's active. Now if I resize this layer, you'll see that it allows us to specify X number of keys which we can assign functions to. Now as I drag this around, you'll see that the actual note names next to on the right of each column change, and they reflect the notes within that control keys layer. And if I click on the little plus symbol to the right of each row, I can add a function to it. So to the first key in that control keys layer, I've added the function layer enable for layer 1. And if I was to press that key on your master keyboard that corresponds to that control layer, you'll see that the layer is turning on and off. Now you can perform a lot of functionality using this because there are a lot of options available. Just for the next example, I'm going to assign to C# a function that changes the MIDI input control to layer 1. And then I'm also going to add to D the ability to change the MIDI input control to layer 2. And if I press those keys, you can see it happening in real time. We also have functions that change the active scene, so each layer can have its own scene, and there's 6 scenes per layer, and we can switch those remotely. We can physically change the selected layer to whatever we wish. The selected layer obviously is reflected on this layer bar. So if I press D# on the keyboard, you'll see it changes to layer 2. Now one really useful thing is the ability to randomize just about what the hell you like, and you can randomize individual layers, selected layers, all layers if need be, all scenes. There's a function for just about everything. So if I move the control keys window out the way, you'll see that when I press E on the keyboard, it's randomizing each layer, all layers. Now, as well as that, we also have options to clipboard options to undo and redo. We can move between next and previous instrument in the currently selected sound font on a particular channel. We can even do next and previous sound font for the selected channel, if you wish. And the final thing I think we've got there is a panic option, so you can do all notes off remotely from the keyboard. Now if we press the little cog icon in the top right corner of this window, you'll get a little pop-up, and we get the option to do things like reorder, so we can reorder the list if we want. We also have an option for copy and paste, so we can copy and paste these settings because these are stored within a preset. So if you want to copy settings from one preset to another, you can, you're covered. So that is control keys in a nutshell. Now one of the big benefits of using FontStack is its ability to access sound fonts on both local and remote storage. And things like searching for instruments, for instance, where we can type something like guitar, you'll notice it returns things that are local and on the remote. So you don't really have to worry about where they're located, you just select them and they get loaded and we can use them. And the same goes for the randomization. If I press the random button, it'll just random a sound font. And we can try it out, see what it sounds like, random another one. The problem though is when you might not want a completely random sound font. You might want to randomize within a particular instrument category, such as guitars or strings or basses and so on. So new to 1.01 is the new randomization options, which you can find by just swiping down on one of the layer buttons, and it'll pop up this little window. Now by default you can say it says no restrictions on that dialog, which means randomizations are made from a pool of local and remote fonts. Now, if you group your sound fonts in folders, like I've got a guitar folder here with lots of subfolders within, we can pick one of these folders and randomize from that folder. Now, let me just go and pick one of the default sound fonts that ship with FontStack just to demonstrate something. If we swipe down on layer 1 now, we'll get the layer options. And if I enable this restrict to folder, you'll see that it no longer says not unrestricted, it gives you a path. And that path is a location where randomized sound fonts will be taken from. So every time I hit the random button, it's going to take a sound font from that folder. Now, it doesn't ship with a great number of sound fonts, but I do give you plenty of places to download them from. As you can see here, these sound fonts in the root folder, that's what it was randomizing from. Now, if I return to the options by swiping down on layer 1, I can actually pick a folder. The first folder was picked because I had a sound font loaded and it used the same location as the sound font. But now I've actually picked the GM folder. You can see that every time I press, I've only got 2 GM sound fonts in here. So what it does is it's going between the 2 sound fonts and randomizing an instrument from those sound fonts. So we've narrowed which sound fonts are selected during the randomization, but right now it's picking a random instrument within each of the sound fonts. Well, because this is a GM sound font and all the instruments in here are a known quantity, they're all ordered into 16 different categories, we can come into this dialog and turn on folder recursion if you've got subdirectories that you want to search as well. But what I'm really wanting to look at is this retain GM instrument option, which I've turned on. Now, whenever I do a randomization, notice that it's switching sound font and staying on the same instrument within the GM sound font bank. So it's alternating backward and forward between those 2 GM sound fonts I've got there. But if I turn on retain GM category and randomize, you'll notice now it's randomizing pianos, but it's randomizing different types of pianos from that piano group within that GM sound font. Now, this is unique to GM sound fonts. You can't do this ordinarily. The way you would do that ordinarily is to create folders of a particular name and put all your string sound fonts in a strings folder. But with GM samples, it opens up a new possibility. We can pick something like a guitar instrument, and then every time we randomize, we're going to get a guitar randomized, a different guitar each time. And because we're going through between the sound banks, we can test out all the guitar samples in that GM folder. Now, if we change to something like synth sound or something from a synth pads category and then start randomizing, we'll get kind of similar sounds. Not all GM sound fonts stick specifically to the same sounds, but they are in general categorized like this, and it does make good sense to use this functionality if you're using GM sound fonts. Now, if you go to the manual and look for the randomizing sound fonts section, which is here, if we click on that section, it will take us to a list of GM categories here. So you can see here how these categories work. There's 16 categories in total. Now, it's important to note that each of the layers can have its own randomize options. So, for instance, we've set some randomization options for layer 1, but if we take a look at layer 2, there's none set there. So we could quite easily enable that and point to a particular folder. So if we wanted layer 2 to randomize something like strings, we could point to a particular folder containing string sound fonts. Now, if we long press on the randomize button, we can randomize 2 layers at a time, I've randomized layers 1 and 2 there. Notice it used the randomization options to randomize that group of layers. And if you do that on 4 layers, it can be quite a powerful tool. Now I also want you to notice that those little round circles in the top left of each of the layer buttons is now gone bright white, which means that there's actually folder restrictions placed upon that layer, as opposed to just containing a sound font. Now I'm sure there's a few things that have been updated that I haven't mentioned in this video, but the one thing I do want to mention is that when you're randomizing instruments, you'll notice that the reverb, chorus and delay levels all change as you're performing a randomization. That's because they are parameters stored within the sound font itself. But if you come into the settings and then turn off the use sound font effect settings, when you do a randomization, you'll see that they'll stay constant. The same is true for the pan knob as well. If you've got multiple layers panned in different directions and you're doing randomizations for multiple instruments, it might be worth turning this off. So that's just about it for this video on the FontStack updates. I'll be back at some point with some masterclass videos, but for now, don't forget to thumb up the video and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.